Welcome to Finish the Fight, a gaming podcast.
Research.
I'm your host, Jesse Reiners.
I'm your host, Alex Kendall.
And today we are going to be covering something that kind of, in my opinion, innovated multiplayer.
I think it really did. And I think it was so much more of a cult classic later, and I don't think the legs truly grew on it.
Yeah.
In a way. So we're going to be talking today about Titanfall.
Stand by for Titanfall.
Yeah, Titanfall, as I said, this game that really changed the way we start looking at multiplayer, the way we play it. And it had so many more things that it added to it. So, you know, Titanfall, all of a sudden, the mobility has changed so much. You're not just running upstairs to get to the next level. You're jumping up the walls. You're running against the walls. You're hanging from the walls to shoot. And not only with the mobility that they added and how you can traverse the map, they added the Titans as well, which was so huge, literally.
One of the major aspects that I think has carried over into Titanfall 2 and even Apex Legends, like Jesse was saying, is the quality of movement. This is probably one of the cleanest movement games that has ever come out, hands down. From the running, and like I said, to the wall running, to the grappling, even the Titans, they feel chunky, but they feel maneuverable.
Yes.
And that's what I like, is that you didn't want like this like weird stealthy, like could like fully move everything, but it still feels very like robotic, mechanical, and clean. I'm going to keep saying this whole episode just because you feel it. And I think out of everything that continues on in gaming is we get that slide dash, that kind of like slide on the ground, get back up. Other games do have it. So plenty of games have tried that or have an idea on it, but it was so much of an afterthought. It was so much of that like, yeah, they'll slide for 2 inches and then abrupt stop.
Yeah,
you know,
it's like, yeah, it's just a hard, like, it's not smooth. Because, yeah, that's the best way to describe the movement in this game and the gunplay and everything. It's smooth. It's so clean. It doesn't feel clunky at all whatsoever. Like, go back and play, like, an older multiplayer game, even a few years before this came out. It's night and day. It's crazy.
And they've taken this, and I think those legs I was talking about, I think I've talked about legs in a couple episodes, but we're talking about true legs here.
We're talking about Titan legs.
I'm talking about thick thighs, built quads. Going here, they really make it to Apex Legends. And this was kind of, and I'll touch on this a little bit, but it was supposed to somewhat be Titanfall 3, but after Respawn partnered with EA, it became this battle royale. It was the era of it, but I think that's really where we picked up steam. The name got recognized, and Titanfall 2 and even Titanfall 1 got this weird influx of a player base.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive right in, tell you as we do what it really took to make Titanfall.
Yeah.
What was this legacy it left, and why did it somewhat come up short?
Yeah, and let's just quickly touch on the game itself. Titanfall is a multiplayer FPS game developed by Respawn Entertainment and published by EA. Some would call it a Call of Duty spiritual successor. You play as a pilot fighting on the Frontier, which are a series of planets on the edge of the known universe. Two factions are at war, the Interstellar Mining Corporation, or the IMC, who are the self-appointed peacekeepers of the galaxy, and the M-Corps, the Frontier Militia. Throughout a match, the pilot will be able to call in their Titan, a mech suit that acts as an extension of the pilot themselves. At any given time, their pilot can either enter or leave their Titan. And when they leave the Titan, then it kind of goes into an autopilot mode.
Yeah, you can have multiple different modes set for it.
Yeah. If enemies place their Titanfall right, they can usually smash another enemy's Titan with theirs. Titans come in 3 classes as well. Ogre, which is the heavy, Strider, which is the medium class, and Atlas, which is more the agile, thinner class as well.
Yeah, so that just gives a quick summary of it. But yes, so for the most part, you start off as your pilot. So as we said, you have this crazy maneuverability to make it through these different maps of these different planetary areas. So giving you a different environment to explore, different color tones, kind of shifting as the planet does, whether it's more of an industrial planet or more of an organic kind of almost farming feel to the planet.
And you have some that have more of like a desert-esque feel because like there's that map with the dragons in the background. It's beautiful.
And so your core multiplayer match is a 6v6 standard death match that takes their kind of ticket system similar to Battlefield, where if you reach a certain amount, you have now won. And you get certain points from, killing other players, other pilots, killing Titans. And we also see that each map can also support different AIs that'll be there. So like these drop pods will come down. You'll either get some frontline infantry or you'll get some mechs or some Marvins that are there that will assist you, be a little bit stronger, and then even some further on bots if you're kind of crushing your enemy or further down the road towards the wrap-up.
Yeah.
And as you build up, we can call it your ultimate. As we build up your ultimate, which is your Titan, you can then call that down, takes a couple seconds, drops in, and then you can either load up or, as I said, you can put it on kind of this autopilot mode or defense mode, and it can do its own thing.
Yeah, and I love about the AIs for like both sides is sometimes you can walk into a room and you'll see the AIs just fighting each other. Like I love little details like that they did. But yeah, and with the AIs and the actual players itself, you can have like a total of around 50 entities on the field at any given time.
Yeah, so about 25 to 25-ish, just because the maps are built as these larger maps that can support these drop pods, support these little skirmishes going on. And for the most part, those enemies that drop are more nuances than they are threats.
Yeah.
But they still help you to somewhat blend in as you're getting to skirmishes. You know, someone might go after them instead of you as a pilot.
Well, I also love about like the standard game is that say when the opposing team reaches the score to win, the match isn't over because that's when now you need to escape the map. You need to get on a ship and leave. And so that's the final time that if you die during that time, you don't respawn afterwards. Like you're done for sure. So it gives that little bit of urgency still at the end of the match. Like
yeah,
it's not
instead
over.
of kind of giving up, because you may even want to save your Titan for the end. Whether you are crushing them or you're losing, you can always use that to, if you're the enemy or if you're the victor, you can use it to shoot down their escape pod, their escape ship, because it lasts for so much time or until everyone can get on it. Eventually, it kind of warp speeds out of there, and those players are saved, getting some extra points for surviving.
But the game was released on Xbox One and PC March 11th, 2014, and on Xbox 360 April 8th, 2014. So the game did come with a season pass, including 9 maps for $25. So let's talk about Respawn itself and kind of how they came to be. So Respawn was founded in 2010 after the abrupt firing of Infinity Ward founders Jason West and Vince Zampella, the famous creators of the Call of Duty franchise. In 2009, after the overnight success of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 release, Zampella and West were fired by Activision and told they could no longer communicate with former teammates or return to their office, and they would not be receiving their $36 million in royalties and bonuses. It didn't take long for publishers to pick up the phone and start calling Infinity Ward co-founders to sign them on. The pair were quick to hit the ground running, forming a new company and signing with EA. They really didn't have time to process being fired, rather just moving forward on their careers, but not without a lawsuit first.
After West and Zampella were fired, over a dozen employees would leave Infinity Ward immediately. But this number would continue to grow to 38 employees, half of the total studio. In less than a week, the two would sue Activision for $1 billion alongside 38 employees who quit Infinity Ward after the founders' firing for those unpaid bonuses. Activision would present a countersuit in April 2010, claiming the two purposely got fired so that they could start a new studio and sign with EA, who gave them absolute ownership of any and all new IP that they would create.
And that's kind of really why they got fired. I know that there was a lot of tension between Infinity Ward and Activision, and Activision had suspicions that they're just trying to get fired because they're trying to form a new studio, which we had touched about it on Destiny. That's not the first time they've been accused of that. This is the second time now.
And I know this was a big thing because I remember with Modern Warfare coming out and hearing about this and hearing about, okay, Infinity Ward's taking over this now, and they're not necessarily doing these things with this whole change of leadership. So it's very interesting to hear on the Call of Duty end, playing that growing up, what that kind of did to shift it along.
Yeah.
Eventually, the lawsuit from Activision was swept under the rug, and the studio purchased Infinity Ward for a total of $5 million over the course of a year. Activision would pay $42 million to the group of 38 employees as well. All this happened shortly before both cases were sent to trial.
When Respawn signed with EA, they had absolutely nothing, no computers or any ideas for a game. The office space that they would move into was a nasty old abandoned office with cockroaches everywhere and broken glass on the carpet. They hadn't even gotten a lease yet. They were more or less squatting there. They would sit on folding chairs and essentially just had notepads and pens trying to come up with something for a couple of months in the abandoned office. So yeah, they were there for a while before they even officially signed a lease and had the abilities to actually start redoing the office. Respawn would pick up a lot of developers from Sony Santa Monica, along with developers from id Software, Gearbox, and some new developers altogether when they got on their feet. They would also receive a lot of resumes from their former coworkers at Infinity Ward as well, bringing in most that they had received and strengthening the bond and loyalty from their work at their previous company. Respawn grew rather quickly, something they did not expect, with a team of 44 in less than 1 month, which is crazy that, within a month you have 44 people in this abandoned office that they're technically squatting in.
I'm going to assume a bit of that's embellished.
This is just what they told. This is what they said, that it was a disgusting office.
I'm assuming because I wouldn't leave my cushy job to come with cockroaches and glass on the floor and be like, this is what we have. So
folding chairs.
I assume it's a rags to riches type story with it. This is from an interview with them, but I assume it's more of, like you said, probably a nasty room that they're kind of building up to figure this out, because you can't tell me that getting acquired by EA didn't give them some capital.
Oh, it did. They couldn't sign the lease yet for this place. That's why they were kind of squatting, and they didn't have any computers or anything. Titanfall's inception started on essentially pen and paper.
A little bit about the development of Titanfall and what brought it about. Around the development of Titanfall, the shooter genre was pretty much set by the standards of Call of Duty and Halo, with Halo borrowing more and more elements from the Call of Duty franchise. With Halo 4 and Halo 5 coming to be, we definitely saw a lot of that with loadouts, with different elements that were added, sprinting, things like that. There were more of these quality of lives that Call of Duty and Battlefield set the standards for. There didn't seem to be much innovation. You had your campaign, so you had a pretty loose campaign for the most part, like a lot of the Call of Duties, just on rails, gets you through. You had as the Call of Duty started to come out, a little bit more added to it, but it was so much more of a side thought around this kind of titan of multiplayer gaming.
Absolutely.
Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2, really leading the charge on those and what set those standards. So, they thought, what if we change or break that pattern or habit? So it's a very lofty goal, but what can we do that isn't just a Call of Duty clone? And they said, what new elements can we really bring to this mix? And that really brought about that idea of, what if we get a better way to travel? An easier way to travel, a cleaner way to travel, what works? And so this also led to, what if we add in just more than the players? We get more of those friendly AIs, enemy AIs, something that spices that map up so it's not always just the killer be killed with other players. You can add to it and add in that battlefield element of a ticket system. And so that's really where it started to come about. And like Jesse said, that pen and paper, just kind of sketching out, what are we going to do? Just that whole giant notebook of what ifs. So yeah, all of these elements that were coming about were going to be combined into Respawn's first game. The founders had been working on Call of Duty for so long that they didn't know where to go, without breaking away from that Call of Duty-esque line. So they were saying, listen, we have to push further and we have to do something that's different. And so with Titanfall, they had that freedom to do whatever they wanted with it.
Yeah, because they had even, I believe, Infinity Ward, or what those guys were doing before Infinity Ward, was also they had been doing shooters even before that. So they've been doing shooters for over 10 years. So it kind of makes sense that they wouldn't break away too much from their own DNA, essentially. When Respawn first started, they knew they wanted to make a shooter from the beginning, but Titanfall was actually nowhere near their first idea. They actually had several ideas, like a game about shooting rockets at dragons, an alien fleeing from the government, a game that was Batman with guns, a demon invasion, and their concept for Mad Men, where soldiers would swap out their limbs for powers. After seeing Deus Ex Human Revolution at E3, they canned that idea of Mad Men, but keep in mind, they were also conceptualizing ideas for the game
while in the midst of this same lawsuit that had been going on. So I know we had wrapped it up in that kind of previous section.
Yeah.
But this is all going on while they're still contacting their lawyers, drafting up documents, apparently with cockroaches and glass, trying to get this figured out.
And if they lose one page of the notebook that had the best concepts, they're looking through, fighting off cockroaches who are eating it.
Who are eating them. That's where they got the alien invasion from, just all those cockroaches.
They were like, wait, we just went through this. What if we made a game about this?
And then they made Cockroach Simulator. Great game.
But let's talk about designing the Titans and some of the players. So since they didn't have computers at first, some of the artists actually decided to sculpt their designs. Eventually, lead artist Joel Emsley would create a 14-inch tall robot, which at the time were supposed to be more exosuits than mechs, finding inspiration from Star Wars, Blade Runner, Aliens, and the M1 Abrams battle tank. Several months later, as the concept for the game continued with the idea of exosuits, the lead artist would take a 3-inch toy, and he actually set it next to the robot and asked everyone else, what do you think of this? Because, again, it was supposed to be an exosuit, but then they're like, what if it's actually a giant, like a 14...
An actual robot instead of just a suit.
Yeah. This sparked the idea that the robots should be mechs. Respawn doesn't actually like the terms mechs when they're describing the Titans because, they thought of it as like a quote-unquote dirty word, according to Zampella in an interview with Game Informer. He thinks that Titans are something totally new since they're more of an extension of the player.
I agree. When I think mech, I think boring game. I'm gonna be honest, man. There's some of those mech games out there where like you're just clunky chicken legs walking around.
It's like you're super slow when you go and you punch and everything. Like I think Pacific Rim is a great example of that. Like when you actually watch the combat, it's just super slow and everything.
That's a Megazord, not a mech.
I'm sorry.
There is a pilot in the head of it or in the chest. It is your call with it. I'm going to call that a Megazord, a Power Sword.
The iconic robots in the game, known as Titans, were created to break the mold of traditional giant robots, as we had just said. They're fast, agile, and aggressive. The studio actually used motion capture to help with this organic vibe from the Titans. Respawn needed to create a balance between Titans and pilots when they were battling, though.
Like I said, it felt fluid. It felt like you had a mocap, but slowed it down maybe 15%.
Yeah, because that's when I first played it, and a Titan ran up and started punching me. I was like, oh, these guys are way faster than I thought.
Yeah, it's not just that like turning. It feels like an extension, and that is in part of the lore as well. With like the pilot's helmet and all of these other things, it kind of taps into your neural net to help you fluidly do it. Very similar to when the Red Ranger brings everyone together for the Megazord and they have great battles.
The studio would start working on the game with the Source engine, but quickly started modifying it to work with the mechanics of the game that they wanted. Though the Source engine wasn't their first choice, they considered using the Unreal Engine or the Ratchet & Clank's Luna engine. And at one point, EA handed them the tech for Lord of the Rings Conquest. And it was just kind of like, hey, here it is. You don't have to worry about anything else. Roll with this. Obviously, they weren't too terribly fond of that. So,
and when it came to creating the pilots, they drew on that same Star Wars knowledge and fandom. And your like initial pilot that you kind of have in the campaign and your first build with it, the helmet and somewhat of the suit is actually based on Boba Fett. So they actually tried to figure out how we're going to build these helmets out. We didn't want like a space helmet, but we didn't want this. So they actually took a lot of the elements of Boba Fett, put it into the Titan, and they have, knowing these two and their work with Call of Duty, especially with Modern Warfare, they pushed a lot for kind of like in-house Easter eggs or fun stuff that they wanted to kind of push into the game. So this was kind of talked about by fans later when the game came out, and they actually confirmed like, yeah, when I was designing it, I pretty much based it off that.
That's dope.
Yeah. So it's really cool, to see how they put this about, because once again, this was a thing where like, okay, they'll just have... Because, let's make generic man in mech suit.
Well, I also love, the mechs are unique as well as the pilots. The pilots are super unique.
And they've added that element to where as you level up, you can customize not only your Titan, but your pilot, your weapon loadouts. And we'll talk about the weapons and some of the gear later on as we start talking about more of the multiplayer and really what this game brought in terms of innovation for the weaponry and, kind of having that in combination with your Titan. But let's jump to the gameplay. Respawn wanted to heavily focus on their multiplayer and bring some innovation to it, creating something that's never been done before. So they thought, why should we kind of even focus on a single player? Players spend a majority of their time in multiplayer anyways, and plus, they honestly just didn't have the manpower to do it.
Well, they did concept a working campaign for a while, but overall it was scrapped as we know. But I think part of the reason was because Zampella was pretty adamant about kind of changing the landscape of the first-person shooter and not having that single-player campaign experience.
I mean, I guess that makes sense because, and I guess you have to kind of brush it off and say, no, we're focusing on multiplayer. The campaign doesn't matter. And I think, a lot of that boils down to really how did playtest go? How is building it going? Could you, from just like, let's say you're just on point B of A to Z, do you see you finishing in time? Or is it more important to get that multiplayer done and more the core game mechanic that can then be in your sequel that you eventually do? Is that more important, or is building the story that you might not even know yet? You might not even know what you want to tell the story as.
Yeah, and what footage is out there of that campaign kind of seems in vein of Titanfall 2, so I'm pretty sure what ideas they had, they just picked them right back up for Titanfall 2 and probably made that process a little easier to making that campaign. Yeah.
They would create Titanfall with 3 goals in mind: player mobility, survivability, and merging cinematic design with fast-paced action. The first thing they would work on was mobility. Respawn felt that in video games, even multiplayer matches, the player is restricted on where they can go. Respawn wanted almost every point on the map accessible and, honestly, exploration-friendly. They wanted you to see what's there, and we even see that in a lot of the like shooting gallery and shooting range that you can test out to see where things are. And the abilities that they installed with the pilots allows for this. For survivability, they had to kind of figure out that KD ratio. You wanted to be out there in the open, getting your kills, having fun, but also being able to not constantly be killed, not be spawn camped. Not to have those elements that really take away and make it kind of like a shooter around those times like Halo and Call of Duty where you can have those aspects happen to you. This is where that AI, comes into play.
The AIs, for the most part, act as a way for the player to get an XP boost after killing them. Players won't always be the target in this case. Instead, the AIs sometimes take most of the fire. And finally, when it comes to the merging the fast-paced action with storytelling, missions start out with cutscenes rendered in the game before the match starts. Throughout the game, the player has teammates from either the IMC or the militia, giving them direction throughout that match. Now, controls for the game do mimic the standard Call of Duty controls, but with the ability to wall run and double jump, they seem to have a different take on the shooter genre. For the most part, the controls are also the same with Titans, with the controls changed. Instead of running, they have the Titan dash, and they have a handful of abilities to use that the pilots do not. Respawn would create controls that, according to them, are a minute to learn and a lifetime to master.
As the game was being developed, Respawn needed to figure out what platform the game would be on. Microsoft would send them the specs for the unannounced Xbox One. Microsoft actually told them the day they announced the formation of the studio that they have dev kits ready for them, whenever they're needing them to come.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the aisle, unfortunately, Sony wouldn't send them the specs for the PlayStation 4. Rather, Sony offered Titanfall a spot on the PS Vita. So jumping into that mobile gaming. Even though programmer John Shearing met with a contact from Sony, she wouldn't budge on the PlayStation 4 specs. For a while, they considered, honestly, just being a PC exclusive, but finally decided that they would go with the Xbox One as an exclusive until 13 months after launch. Then they would port it over to the PlayStation 4. This, though, never happened due to the negotiations being done through EA with Microsoft and not through Respawn. The two parties decided Titanfall would be a console exclusive for the Xbox One. It didn't rule out future installments of the franchise, though. So this one was just signed with them, saying, hey, it'll stay with Microsoft for the most part. But if you were to make more games, that's not saying they can't go everywhere.
Yeah, and just imagine, they're like, hey, we want to be multi-platform, and PlayStation's like, you want to do the Vita? And there's like, what? No. Let's be on the PS4. And there's like, no.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, you're really taking a chance on a brand new IP that you're not sure is going to work. So I understand their hesitance of it.
Yeah, and PlayStation 2 as well. The same thing kind of happened where at one point, a lot of studios weren't getting dev kits and they weren't getting a lot of help with programming for the console as well. But let's talk about some changes in design. So in 2013, co-founder Jason West would leave the studio, and with his departure, the game would see a change. Originally, each mission would always start with the player inside a Titan, and only when the Titan was doomed would the player eject and continue the match from there. This was an inspiration from Super Mario Bros. Overall, Respawn felt that this approach may not be as open to players as they would like to think, so they changed it so that players started without their Titans at first. This would give players a more familiar start to an FPS game, along with adding a new layer of strategy. How quickly can you get your Titan? This game was also a lot more fast-paced originally than what we got when it was released, and had more players on the field during a match, which was eventually dialed back to 6 versus 6. So I think at one point they even considered 12 versus 12. So, they just knew like it just got way too chaotic at that point with everything going on.
Yeah, and luckily we did have a beta to look at. Originally, the beta for Titanfall was on the Xbox One and PC, and were only invite-only. EA spent weeks sending out private invites before finally announcing that the beta would actually be open for any and all. The beta featured 3 game modes: Attrition, Hardpoint Domination, and Last Titan Standing. It would run from February 14th through February 17th, 2013. During the first day of the beta in February, Microsoft servers would go down, leaving a majority of eager players on a, quote, "no servers found" prompt. Respawn couldn't create new servers, so they had to work with Microsoft as quickly as possible to get them back online. Come to find out, it wasn't the servers being down, rather a bug in the beta itself. After a couple of hours, the issue was fixed and players were able to commence Titanfall. Microsoft would give players affected by the outage a free 7-day Xbox Live Gold membership.
Over 2 million players participated in the beta. After sifting through all the data collected from the beta, EA would decide to actually cancel the Titanfall's release in South Africa due to the poor connectivity issues there. They needed to deliver a game with seamless performance, and it just couldn't be done in that country. And Respawn would fall under some heat when it came to matches, or most of those matches being 6 versus 6. Respawn saw that more players added to a match would make the match more uncomfortable. There are roughly 5 or 6 directions that a player can be killed, and with the player being able to run on walls and double jump, essentially nowhere is safe. So having more of those players is just way too chaotic. They built the game to be 6 versus 6. Lead designer Justin Hendry would state in an interview with Polygon, quote, "When the people start playing Titanfall like Titanfall, the player count becomes non-issue. Add in the fact that there are multiple AIs on the field and Titans. Each game is meant to feel like a battlefield," which I completely agree it does. Like it feels organic.
The game was developed by a team of 85 people, taking roughly 4 years to create, finally being completed and going gold February 24th, 2014. Even though the Xbox 360 version of the game was set to release 2 weeks after the Xbox One and PC versions on March 25th, EA would announce a week before the release that the Xbox 360 would be delayed another 2 weeks to give Bluepoint Games, which was working on that 360 port, the extra time they needed to polish the game up. They wanted to make sure that the game delivered the same exact experience as the Xbox One and PC versions. Some retailers would accidentally sell the 360 version a few days before the actual release date, but it wasn't playable until its new launch date of April 8th, being an online game only.
That was supposed to be a little birthday gift to myself because it was supposed to come out the day before my birthday. And it got delayed.
It's a shame.
Sad birthday that year. It was the worst birthday that year. Not really. But now let's talk about marketing this game, this new IP coming from a new studio of, the founders of Infinity Ward, who created the monolith Call of Duty. So Titanfall was not an easy game to market, according to Respawn. They didn't have a single-player mode, which was the driving force for a lot of FPS games. A lot of modern first-person shooters relied heavily on showing clips of cutscenes from the game, but Titanfall really doesn't have any cutscenes. They would show instead a lot more 3 to 5 minute clips of the gameplay itself, because that's really what you had to be sold on. But one of the first things that they did was Titanfall Arcade. This was developed by the creative agency Heat. TitanfallArcade.com was a website that featured 3 classic playable Atari games: Asteroids, Missile Command, and Centipede. but they featured Titans instead of what was actually in the game. But the site has sadly since been taken down.
Next, we had Life is Better with a Titan. This live-action commercial, which was produced by Microsoft, would show a man walking through a city, going about his everyday life, but accompanied by a Titan. You know, making his life easier, like shooting out traffic lights so he can cross the street and so on. At the end of the commercial, he encounters another man with a Titan, and the battle ensues.
I love marketing like this because the commercial is hilarious. Like, he does want to cross the road, so the Titan just shoots out the light so he can just go.
It's fantastic.
It's hilarious.
Next, we had Free the Frontier. This live-action trailer, which is broken up into 3 parts, gave fans a more serious look at the game, showing a pilot making his way through grunts and eventually getting into his own Titan and battling all of those who oppose them.
Which is, again, great trailer. It's awesome. Having a live-action trailer of this, it's too good. But next we have the Berlin Titan. So a life-size Titan would appear at a Berlin train station. There wasn't too much context on the Titan being there, other than being an obvious marketing ploy with only a nameplate that had Titanfall on it at the Titan's feet. So I love, like, just imagine, like, you're going to work one day and you just see that and you're just like, okay, and just go about your day. Next, we have the Companion app. So this app that was available for iOS, Android, and the Windows Phone syncs with the Xbox One version of the game and will give the players an interactive full-size layout of the map and the latest updates on the weapons, game modes, etc. Because I remember at this time, we were getting more of that. Destiny had that. Like, that was kind of like the hot thing to do. Finally, and I fell for this, we had an April Fool's that actually wasn't through Respawn themselves, but it was still kind of a promotion for the game. So even though Respawn had some plans for an April Fool's prank incorporating Voltron, IGN beat them to the punch with something similar. On April 1st, 2014, IGN posted a video showing Optimus Prime having his own DLC for the game and it being a playable Titan. Respawn absolutely loved it, though eventually Respawn had to confirm that Optimus Prime was actually not going to be in the game because...
Unfortunately not.
I fell for it. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't paying attention to the date, saw that. I was like, this is great. And then looked at the date and I was like...
If I'd been looking back, I probably would have broke my disc in half. I am not a fan of the Transformers.
Well, you didn't have to buy it. It's a DLC.
I just don't want it in my game, period. I want Shia LaBeouf nowhere near any of the things.
Shia LaBeouf was also a DLC character at one point.
I'll take that over Optimus Prime. Next up, let's just touch on a summary, like what the campaign was meant to be. Like we said, there was no single-player campaign. It was more so... you played through the idea of a campaign in multiplayer.
Yeah, like, I even visiting this, like, I was like, what was that campaign about? Like, I didn't really know.
Yeah, so it's a very loose-based one, and we do see something like this in a lot of, like, MMORPGs where there's, like, a loose campaign around some of the stuff you're doing that you don't really remember, but we'll give you kind of a summary of what that was and how it somewhat connects into what we do in Titanfall 2.
Yes.
So the game takes place 15 years after the Titan Wars. The Frontier Militia is being hunted down by the Interstellar Miner Corporation, the IMC. Like we said, those were kind of the self-appointed peacekeepers who are trying to, quote-unquote, keep that peace. That's what it says in the back of their shirts, the period after each of those words. Keep that peace. The IMC are out to harvest colonies and planets of their resources. But the militia sees this as terrorism. As the militia is being hunted down, they run low on supplies and must raid the IMC on a gas mining world. They succeed in the raid, but they barely make it out. As the IMC tracks the militia, they find a hidden colony and use it to test their new Spectre combat drones, which are, like I said, those robots that spawn in. And they use them to murder citizens in that colony. The militia comes to the rescue, battling the IMC and making a deal with James McAllen, who was a former officer of the IMC Colonial Navy. They save the remaining citizens, and McAllen will provide them with schematics for the IMC refueling station. If the militia can take it out, they can cut the chain of supply for the IMC.
From there, the militia travels to Angel City to rescue McAllen's friend, ex-IMC pilot Robert Tobe, one of the best pilots in the Frontier. Though they rescue Tobe, they see an opportunity to take out the IMC's IMS Sentinel supercarrier. With Barker's expertise, they devise a plan and successfully destroy the carrier. Next, the militia goes to the Boneyard, a base surrounded by dragon-like monsters, we had mentioned earlier, that are only kept at bay due to this dog-like whistle. The militia plans to reverse the signal to have it attract the dragons instead of keeping them away, and they succeed in doing so. And from there, the militia heads to the Demeter refueling station to override the reactors, and in doing so, destroying the station. While there, McAllen locks himself inside the reactor to destabilize it. Before it overloads, though, McAllen reveals that years prior, he was part of a mutiny on an IMC ship, and that it was Vice Admiral of the IMC, Marcus Graves, that told him to do so. McAllen then convinced Graves to join the militia. The final battle of the game takes place on the Hamid Robotics facility, with Graves fighting for the militia now. The IMC's AI spyglass is now in command. Eventually, the militia destroys the robotics facilities, weakening the IMC further since the Spectres are a huge source of their militaristic manpower. The IMC are now on the defensive. They've been cut off from reinforcements, and it's going to take an estimated 2 years for those reinforcements to arrive. As I said, the campaign itself, really, it's what you get is you get exposition before each match and then go into it. It's kind of forgettable at times, but I get it. Like, I didn't buy this game for the story of the multiplayer campaign, essentially.
But that story will continue on. We will see the Hammond robotics facility later. We even see it in Apex. There's actually an entire map based on it, and plenty of other just really cool little tidbits that start to really build that lore and build that world. I take this as some of just your first games that you play with it. Any of your games that start out, even Mass Effect 1 kind of started building the lore up, takes it into 2 and even further on to build that story, make these characters memorable in your mind. And Titanfall 2, I think, really takes that okay, I see that you guys wanted a single-player campaign or a story that you understood, so we got something for you.
Yeah.
But let's touch on the DLCs that will come out for Titanfall. So Titanfall would have 3 DLC map packs that would be released after the launch of the game. To celebrate the first anniversary of the game, Respawn would release the Season Pass for free. And most fans were happy about this, but obviously some who had purchased it for that 25 buckaroonies were a little peeved off about it. They were kind of like, hey, you gave it for free. Why? It's like, well, I mean,
I guess it's the same thing of being like, well, you lowered the price of this game a year after it released.
Yes.
I paid full price. What did you do with that?
It's that type of deal of instead of waiting for the Steam sale, I bought it on day one when I could wait a year and just get it for pennies.
Yeah, literally.
The first up we had was Expedition. This DLC was actually released sooner than it was intended to, but Respawn had to satisfy players that blasted their way through the game and made their way to level 50 a lot quicker than was expected. It features the map Runoff, Swampland, and War Games. It would also feature the new ability to wall run on trees, released April 12th, 2014.
I just love that. People are automatically at 50. They're like, what now? They're just like, oh, crap. Don't do that. Slow down.
Please stop.
The next one we had is Frontier's Edge, and it would include 3 new maps, which were Dig Site, Haven, and Export. It was released July 31st, 2014. And finally, we had IMC Rising. The third and final DLC would release September 9th, 2014, containing maps Sandtrap, Backwater, and Zone 18.
And we'll move on to, as far as cut material, this is what has been publicized. I'm assuming from that sweet sketchbook they had in their roach house. I'm assuming most of the roaches ate some of it, so we can't get some of it.
It's unconfirmed.
Because originally we only had 3 pilot abilities in Titanfall. I believe they call it the OG. I think it's actually on the box art now. It's just big, just a big OG in the background.
They had an unpaid intern just write OG.
On every single one of them.
Pull out the slips.
It's pretty great. We eventually get later abilities into Titanfall 2. But as far as what is publicized, the game was originally going to be called Titan Wars. And finally, players were supposed to be able to jump 3 stories high, like these jump packs.
Yeah.
But then they kept it to where you can kind of get a boost, but it was more so you could jump and wall climb.
Yeah, because they said it just it broke the balance of the game. Because you can get to someone so quickly, and it's like, what's the point of being on the third story? Like, you don't see them coming.
No, especially like when you're going against a Titan and you just spring up 3 stories. Like, they can't really track that, and then
especially
you get mounted.
How quickly you'll jump.
Yeah.
But remember, as I said, we did have those original concepts. Like, there was going to be fighting dragons with rocket launchers, and then Deus Ex came out with their concept and scrapped their concept of manpower, essentially. So there were a lot more concepts being thrown around. But yeah, the overall Titan Wars, I feel like just wouldn't have the same feel if it was called that.
No, that sounds like Chrome Hounds to me, which is a mech game. And because like that's just like Chrome Hounds, Titan Wars, like that kind of 2-syllable type thing.
Well, especially I just hear Wars and I think Star Wars, so I think it just
I assume just a generic game. Like I always hear that whenever I hear like Wars or like a word like that put in, I'm just like, that's generic.
Titanfall, it sounds more interesting. In the cover for Titanfall, where you have the Titan, or you have like the pilots like almost like skulking on the end of the Titan's gun. God, such a good cover.
It was so well done. And I mean, I guess we'll just take a quick second. We'll talk about this when we wrap. But the art style and just the direction that was taken. And again, the fluid movement. When you enter and exit your Titan was so cool. And there's multiple ways to do it.
Oh, yes. It's so cool.
You know, so we're bringing on the multiplayer now, and we're going to bring into kind of what the Titans were, what their kind of differences were. But each one of them, you could kind of be behind them and enter and slide through their legs, and they'd scoop you up and shove you in their belly.
They grab you. Like, you can jump, and they grab you and just shove you into their face. The first time I ever played that and that happened, I was like, oh, what? Because I thought he was like going to kill me. I was like, what are you doing? It was so cool.
It was so well done, and it's such a neat way to do it. Another game that has kind of a neat, interesting concept like that is Warframe, if you've ever played it. So in Warframe, as you finish a mission, you actually exit by like docking in your ship. Your ship is like this, so it's vertical, and you actually just press your like arms into this like mold of yourself, and it just like rolls the cage, and you like go into your ship.
Oh, that's so cool.
So stuff like that's just neat, and I really appreciate when people pay attention to details. It's not just like a hatch.
Yeah, it's just like, or you click a button, and all of a sudden it's like a half a second frame of you entering it somehow. And I love when you get in the Titan, there's like, 5 or 6 screens that all light up.
Oh, your whole HUD starts to light up as you activate it.
And like the 6 screens just have like a half a second delay when they all do it. There's so many little details in this game that just make it perfect. Like no one would think of, but you appreciate it nonetheless. Yeah, so let's dive more into the multiplayer. So the game cannot be played unless a player either has Xbox Live Gold or an EA Origin account for PC, which would leave a bad taste in fans' mouths. After all, first-person titles before this, were really, for the most part, could be played offline for the campaign alone. I know I'm a huge campaign guy. That's why I play a lot of my first-person shooters. The game has its own dedicated servers, though, through Xbox Live Cloud technology, which Respawn credits that for making the game possible whatsoever, even down to implementing those AIs in the matches. The multiplayer isn't only dedicated to the story mode. It also supports other game types as well. Modes like Deathmatch, Marked for Death, which is kind of like COD's VIP, Pilot Skirmish, which is a Titanless mode, and it's actually 8 versus 8.
So it's it's Deathmatch without Titans.
Yeah. And then Last Titan Standing, One Life, Frontiers Defense, which is more of a wave defense, and Hardpoint Domination, which is more of a territory-style game.
And, along with the amazing implementations and quality of life that they've brought to the pilots and Titans, I'm going to touch on some of the weaponry that we get. And what I absolutely love within the Titanfall universe is as Titanfall 2, and Apex came out, a lot of the weapons carried over but became updated versions of themselves. A lot of other games do it. Halo has done it, but it's really cool to see. But we'll start with the Titans. So obviously the Titans have something more than a little pea shooter. We have everything from a 40mm cannon, quad rockets, plasma railgun, arc cannon, even the triple threat, which was this thoop, thoop, thoop grenade launcher.
Yeah. I sucked with that thing.
But yeah, it's just a wide variety of what would typically be like helicopter mounted, some like side tank mounted things they can have as like one of their arms or a mounted cannon that would help along with those things. As far as tactical abilities, you had things like a vortex shield that you like throw your hand out and actually absorb all of the incoming projectiles.
And they shoot back, which was this was as far as unrealistic as this game got for a game set a couple hundred years from now. Like, that was it. The rest of this seemed like realistic.
Hey, we don't know yet.
We don't know yet. In terms of my limited knowledge of how we're advancing in this floaty bullet technology.
Yeah, it's coming. Also, electric smoke, which would disable or hurt pilots trying to mount you. So other pilots, enemy pilots, could jump on you and steal your power core, which would drain your battery way down, drain your health. The electric smoke would shock them over time and could even kill them before they could get that out.
I love the detail of when there was a pilot on you. You hear dum, 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 like you could hear them walking
climbing on it.
Yes,
it was perfect. Last we had was the particle wall, which is a one-way shield, which would allow you to fire through it, but block from the other side. So really well done. And then your ordnances, which was something like the shoulder-mounted things or some side abilities, rocket salvo, slaved warheads, cluster missiles, and multi-targeting missile systems. And then you had tier kits, which we have for both pilots and Titans, which would just be some perks. So perks that you could add on to it. Now, again, I'm going to say that Titanfall is not my favorite game. It's my favorite weapons in a game. It's so clean. It's so well done. And like I said, I'm a huge Apex player in today's age. I am marginal at best. I really enjoy the game, though. So it's really cool to see, you have something like the R101C carbine, which was kind of this very standard rifle that actually makes its way back to a 201, I believe, in Titanfall 2 and a 301 in Apex.
Ooh.
We have, some SMGs, the EVA 8 shotgun, which has made its way all the way through, sniper rifles, as well as sidearms, like the Heimann P2011, which becomes the P2020. My sidearm of choice. And then we also had anti-Titan weapons. So obviously, if you're going against the big boys, you got to have some big artillery.
Well, that was one thing they added to balance it out because essentially they were scared that like, oh, when a Titan comes on the field, the game's over. But they're like, no, we're going to give you weapons made just to fight the Titans.
That was one thing they struggled with that balance was like, do we just have them be able to, jump on and pull the battery? Do they have to rifle them a bunch and then hopefully with grenades and rifles, they take them out? So these were added. We had things like the Sidewinder AT-SMR, which is a rapid-fire anti-Titan rocket launcher. The Archer Heavy, which was a guided one. So the first one was like these mini rockets that would go out. This is like a big boy that would charge up for it. The MGL, which is a magnetic grenade launcher. And then the charge rifle, which would you'd charge up this electronic arc bolt and it would fire out. Yeah. That's usually the one that I end up using for a lot of it.
It's the easiest one to use, in my opinion.
And it's my sniper of choice in Apex. And then ordnances. So these are, again, your grenades or things you could do. You had a data knife, which was kind of cool because you could jump in and hack robots with it.
Oh, yeah. I loved that because it was literally you press the button on the knife. It was it's just a really sharp USB drive.
It was because then you could also stab it into something you stab it in, turn it, and it's oh, I'm a good guy now. What's going on? It's me, Marvin. Arc grenades. Marvin. Arc grenades, which was an EMP.
Yeah.
Satchel charges, frag grenades, and an arc mine, which was the grenade, just in a mine form. And then again, your 3 abilities that will eventually expand into Titanfall 2 are Cloak, so temporary invisibility, Stim, which allows for a speed and health boost, and then Active Radar Pulse, which was this knife. Actually, this was different than this one, but this was like a pulse, kind of like the UAV in Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Where you could see through walls. Well, this one you can see through walls and stuff like that. But that's kind of knife, pulses. I guess Daredevil vision is more like it.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of like a radar, essentially.
And then again, you had your Tier 1 and your Tier 2 kits were your kind of passive abilities that were added in, whether it's more health, ability to take a Titan down faster. Plenty more with that. So like I said, the innovation that was added in this was just really, really cool. And being able to customize your loadouts, level up your weaponry, it just made the game, really have that longevity that, again, I don't think Titanfall got the fair shake because of that loss of campaign and kind of, it came out at the time that you had the Titans of industry against them.
Yes.
Titans against Titanfall. And it came out of poor timing. So, but Titanfall 2, I think, really implemented a lot more of it, and I think did it really well.
Yeah, and speaking just more of some of their innovations, Respawn also wanted players to stay online when they were playing games, even if they had a few off matches. This is why they implemented opposing teams changing out more often than not. If after a few matches, one team is very obviously dominating the other team, they put them in a different lobby. Because you get in that thing where you find yourself with a good team when you're playing a game, but you keep playing against this different team that just destroys you. And you're like, but I like my team. So they did finally take it upon themselves to be like, okay, if this team's messing you up, obviously we need to balance this out a little more. Go find your own thing. Now, it didn't take long for PC users to see its fair share of cheaters in the game. It only took Respawn about 2 weeks to implement the anti-cheat system Fair Fight into the game, banning anyone who was modifying the games to win.
Mm-hmm. I like all your typical PC releases.
Mm-hmm.
People find loopholes, you then close them.
Yep. With the game's second DLC, Frontier's Edge, it would also include the game's currency with the black market, but it could not be earned with real money. Respawn did not want microtransactions in the game whatsoever. To earn the currency, players had to participate and win in matches. Players could also sell unwanted burn cards to earn more currency.
Mm-hmm.
If a player chooses to stay at the highest level of the game, which is 50, then a percentage of the experience that they win from a match would be converted into that currency.
Because, correct me if I'm wrong, you could prestige, right?
Yeah, it's kind of the same concept.
Call of Duty,
yeah.
You could kind of be like, hey, look at me, I've prestiged far too many times for someone normal playing these games.
Yeah. Well, we saw people did it pretty quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they allowed that in there. And like you said, if they wanted to stay there, they could earn revenue. Or you could show off and be like, I've already been there, baby. I'm level 150.
Yeah. In October 2014, Respawn would add ranked and competitive playlists to the game, Death Pro and Deadly Ground. The game didn't exactly ship with esports settings and game modes in mind, but Respawn was still excited to see Titanfall potentially become an esport game. This never really happened since fans weren't really fans of the tools for private matches that they were given in the game and lack of interest in the ranked playlist. So I think it's obvious they didn't have esports in mind, so they didn't design it around that, but they're like, we'll just let the community do it. And the community's like, no.
And you have to... And it sucks for them because they were right behind the esports bubble.
Yes.
You had the very early on one when MLG was created. You had that first kind of like figuring out what was going on. But come like 2015 and 2016 is really where it exploded, especially with Twitch pushing a lot of it, YouTube gaming coming down the road with it. It was all starting to come out. They just didn't hit it.
Yeah.
And to add one more thing to multiplayer, I guess it'd be multiplayer. We're going to put it here. That's the best way I can say with it. But some Easter eggs and just some ideas that I've found within Titanfall. So these guys, Zampella and West, they're actually known for putting Easter eggs in their games. Call of Duty's had a decent number of them that they worked on.
Oh, yeah.
And they brought that idea over. And one that was kind of a little cheeky fun one was instead of Dr. Pepper, they had some Dr. Paprika cans around.
I wonder how those taste.
Quite delicious, I might say. Just pour it on your chicken. Ooh, we got a tasty dish right there. But one that's notable and that has continued its way through and found its way into fans' hearts is the little stuffed Loch Ness Monster. It's this little Nessie, little squishy Nessie that's in there. And it's made its way into Titanfall 2 and as well as Apex.
Interesting.
And it's kind of become this offhanded mascot of it, which is kind of cool, and it's kind of given that lightheartedness to the series, I guess you would say. So you can find Nessie or the Loch Ness Monster Easter egg on the maps Demeter and Relic. And, fans finding this because really all in all, I think people expected a lot more Easter eggs coming from these two.
Yeah.
But we got just a couple offhand things. As I brought up before, the first kind of armor for the pilot was based off of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
So that was kind of Easter egg-ish.
Well, you got to think as well as it's their first new IP. They have to prove themselves as a new studio. So they probably put a lot of maybe future Easter eggs on the back burner for now, or ones they wanted.
Yeah, and we may discuss that, further down the road. But obviously, the little stuff Loch Ness, which one of you should buy me if that's a real thing. I'll give you my address. Just send it to me.
Go on Etsy. It'll probably be on there.
No, I want an official one.
Are there official ones?
I don't know, but I want an official one now. Go to Respawn, tell them to go back in time, make it, give it to me. No, so it's cool that this has made its way along, and we're seeing it, like I said, in their future games, and it's become this little fan thing that people know and love, and I'm glad it has continued. It's just a really silly thing in a game, and we see it in plenty of games.
Oh yeah,
where it's like it almost gets like a mascot-esque like statute to it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. So I'm definitely glad that they had that in there. As far as music goes, the Titanfall original soundtrack was composed by Stephen Barton, who joined the project in early 2013. Originally a film composer, Barton was in the middle of a gap year deciding to go to music school when he was approached by Harry Gregson Williams to assist with work on the Metal Gear Solid franchise. Gregson Williams was one of the first Hollywood composers to merge that, that video game, film, composer kind of amalgamation. And they used it to teach Barton, all he knew to get those skill sets rolling in the industry. A priority of Barton's for the soundtrack was to think of the music as commentary for the game rather than competing with the sound design and what you were seeing on screen. The game uses a mixture of electronic and acoustic instruments to create what Barton calls a, quote, melting pot for the galaxy. Since there was no rules for living on the edge of the galaxy, all the music can be taken out of context. An example would be the use of a Japanese tiger drum to complement these textures out of its typical kind of cultural use.
Yeah.
Because it was just Wild West, baby.
Literally the Wild West. He's like, I can do whatever I want here.
And it worked.
Yeah. A palette of sounds were chosen rather than a specific genre of music for the game, coming from the notion that it would be easier to recognize Titanfall as a franchise if it had a specific sound. Because, again, we need to make everything stand out down to what kind of music we're doing. Barton specifically pulled certain instruments and elements out of different genres, like the untraditional baritone electric guitar, to give fans a true sense of originality in the game. Barton wanted the music to soar and glide smoothly like the Titans, without a sense of comfort and safety since the game is so fast-paced. The Titanfall team did understand that some people don't like to listen to the music during multiplayer, so the music can be turned down in the multiplayer campaign if it's too terribly distracting. The sound and music of Titanfall was designed specifically with the Turtle Beach headset in mind. As the official headset of the Xbox One, PS4, and Nintendo, a special version of the headset were created in partnership with the Titanfall audio and music team at EA to create the greatest Titanfall experience possible. Engineers were brought in to make the headsets not only the best sound in gaming, but one of the best sounding headsets in the entire audio industry.
And I will say, I know everyone has their opinion with Turtle Beach. I've owned different pairs of them, and they're pretty good. I mean, they're not they're not audiophile type headsets. They're good though. So it's really cool that they partnered with the gaming industry to push audio for a gaming experience.
Yeah, and specifically, like as it was said, they were working with. Okay, we're designing sounds. How did it sound in this Turtle Beach headset?
So the Titanfall original soundtrack released on April 8th, 2014, digitally through iTunes, Amazon, and later onto Spotify. Electronic Arts Music produced the soundtrack and released it through the Network Records record label. The music was mainly recorded at Abbey Road Studios, with some ethnic percussion being recorded in Los Angeles. The soundtrack contains 18 tracks for a total of 60 minutes and 37 seconds.
I have no real opinion about the soundtrack. It works. It works.
It works. It's kind of a blend. It's honestly, I put it on the other day just to kind of go through it. It's a really great background one.
Oh, for sure.
And I think they've done well with it. But again, sometimes you want your soundtrack to stand out. In a game like this, you want it just to work with it.
Well, I think people sometimes don't realize that this music is supposed to correspond with what's happening in a game. So sometimes people forget that listening to it without the context of the game being played, it's a completely different experience.
Let's wrap up with some release versions. So as we said, your standard came out on the Xbox One and PC, later on that 360. The Deluxe Edition was available for EA's Origin. This edition of the game included all 3 of the DLC map packs, and the Collector's Edition. This came with an 18-inch Titan statue with battery-powered LED lighting, an art book, and a full-size schematic poster of the Atlas Titan. I miss this type of stuff being released.
Oh, we need more of it.
I need to go back in time and grab it. Many would believe that Microsoft would be releasing an exclusive Titanfall-themed Xbox One due to an insider leaking this information. To find out, the Titanfall-themed Xboxes were actually created for Respawn employees. Microsoft would, however, release limited edition Titanfall Xbox One controllers. So kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah, controller. There you go.
It works.
But let's talk about the general reception and reaction of this game. How did the world react to Titanfall? So Respawn was winning dozens of awards left and right, showcasing the game at shows like E3 and Gamescom, winning over 60 at E3 alone, including Best in Show, Best Original Game, Best Console Game, Best PC Game, and just a million other ones, because apparently they won just essentially everything other than Best PS game.
Best campaign.
Best offline multiplayer campaign.
Yep.
When Respawn first showcased the game in 2013 Tokyo Game Show, they were rather nervous, with Japan being rather critical of mechs in general, especially in video games. Most of the gamers at the event actually loved what they saw, and as soon as the show opened at 10 a.m., there would be a 2-hour wait to play the game. One Japanese journalist told community manager Abby Heppy that Western mechs were usually, quote, shitty. He wanted to know why Respawn's mechs were so good. They later won the Future Award at the event.
Yeah, and the Future Award is kind of like what's that kind of best in show that's coming up. And it really was. I mean, if you guys are familiar with your mechs, like I've said, a lot of Western mech games are chunky and boring and slow and sluggish when compared to like anything that was coming out of Japan at the time.
Yes.
So to get this that has such fluid movement, very much like Gundam, very much like that kind of feel to it, it really shaped up and really, honestly, in my opinion, set the bar for years to come with the idea of mechs or mech-like things in mind.
Yep. Respawn really didn't expect the kind of positive feedback that they would receive while showcasing the game at multiple events. As I said, they won so many events, even, a Japanese journalist was like, how did you guys do this right?
Yeah.
Like, no Western games do this right. Microsoft was taking a risk on Titanfall and wanted it to be the first blockbuster hit for the console to help it catch up with PS4 sales, which, it seemed to help upon release. Many would cite Titanfall when it came to the spike in Xbox One sales around the time of its release. Now, Titanfall would land a 86 out of 100 on Metacritic, while also winning awards like the National Academy of Video Games Trade Reviewers Original Action Award.
Titanfall released at a time where not only the FPS was dominating the market, but the surface level of the games were driven by the story, with games like Halo 3 and Modern Warfare 2 setting a new standard. Even after winning the love of fans from the release of Titanfall, many still yearn for an actual single-player campaign. Respawn founder Vince Zampella would state that doing that in any future Titanfall games would simply be a step backwards. After all, they reinvented the FPS genre with Titanfall. Though Titanfall 2 does feature a single-player campaign, Zampella still doesn't think the first game would have been as successful if it had a campaign. However, Respawn's COO would state in an interview with Game Informer around the same time that the company wasn't ruling out that single-player idea.
Yeah, so I think Zampella really was sticking to his guns.
Yes.
He's like, no. And I think everyone else was like, come on, this kind of suffered a little bit.
Yeah, and he's trying to be like, no, if we did that, it would have been even worse. Trying to be like, I created the perfect game.
Yeah, and I will say, because I knew next to nothing about this, so when I bought it, I was like, oh, there isn't a single-player campaign. Luckily, the multiplayer just made up for it entirely.
And this follows the lines of games that I think would have done a little better if you had an element like that, like Brink or Shadowrun for the Xbox 360, which featured only multiplayer. I think Shadowrun did have an offline, but only multiplayer with no story driven, so you don't have like a love note to attach to it.
Yeah.
You don't have something that can bring you back, as far as memorizing the game and like what it was, but you just remember that multiplayer experience you might have had. In October 2013, during a keynote speech, Sony executive Adam Boyes would state, quote, "Right now, exclusives are just a way for console makers to brag louder. Nobody gains from exclusivity in perpetuity." PlayStation fans also wanted their fill of Titanfall 2. In an interview with Eurogamer, lead artist Joe Emisel expressed the possibility of Titanfall coming to PlayStation, but they were with Microsoft and PC for now. Later on, director of programming for the Microsoft Gaming, Major Nelson, would go on Reddit, confirming Titanfall isn't coming to PlayStation. EA has stated multiple times, though, that they aren't, favorable to one side or the other.
Because they were just like, this was just a deal we made for this single title. We're not married to Microsoft.
Again, going back, it wasn't Respawn who made this deal. It was EA and Microsoft who made this deal.
And EA made this deal because Sony wasn't willing to work with Respawn either about this.
Yeah.
So there's all these different factors, and I love the quote where, Adam Boyes is just like, oh, we get nothing out of exclusives. You guys are the king of exclusives. What are you talking about? Like, Microsoft barely has Halo as an exclusive right now, and you guys have like everything. Like, come on.
Well, and especially when you just like, you're a Vita game. Like, you're not worthy of mainlining. You're going to be a mobile game.
I think they just saw the outroar and then kind of got a little upset about it later.
Yep.
In 2013, EA lost an estimated $121 million, and many analysts assumed that EA would stay in the red for 2014. But by Q2, EA would actually come up around $775 million. This led analysts to believe that Titanfall and other titles under EA helped with this drive of revenue. By all means, Respawn knew their IP wouldn't sell as much as Call of Duty title, but they still had hope that it would do relatively well, promoting it as the next blockbuster project. EA would reveal that the game had sold about 925,000 copies at the end of March. Regardless of this, EA and Microsoft would keep their mouths shut from there on out in terms of sales. VG charts would show that the game had sold 3.1 million copies, but these are copies that were sold to retail stores, with community manager Abby Heppy stating in an interview with EXL podcast that the game sold more than 3 million copies. By the time that Q4 wrapped up in 2014, EA's revenue would actually be down once more by almost 10 million. And by October 2015, Respawn would announce that they've reached the 10 million mark with Titanfall and confirm that they are working on a new unnamed sequel to the game. Some were rather confused by this. It was only announced that Titanfall reached the 10 million mark, but it wasn't specified exactly what 10 million was. And most would assume that it was just players. But since October 2014, the game would only hit 7 million unique players, but not 7 million copies sold. So yeah, they were just like, 10 million! And everyone's like, 10 million what?
It's a number.
10 million!
Yeah.
Because I just remember everyone, like, I went to the actual tweet and everyone's just like, 10 million what? Like, what are you guys talking about? Like, what?
I made 10 million brownies. Overall, Titanfall is a game that risked the idea of throwing out the traditional campaign experience and merging it with the multiplayer game mode. It didn't take long for fans to fall in love with the game and showed that the creators of Call of Duty weren't incapable of creating a masterpiece beyond the series and seeing its fair share of imitators, like Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. They created a game with layers upon layers of depth and what seemed like a perfect balance of, not only pilots fighting other pilots, but pilots fighting against titans. Nonetheless, the game did see its fair share of shortcomings, mainly how well it financially performed. Many felt that the lack of a true campaign experience and Xbox exclusivity, it hurt the game overall. Sure, Titanfall went against the grain, but for better or for worse, it showed. The studio would push through with a sequel and even a spin-off Battle Royale game set in the Titanfall universe. Jesse wrote that. It is not a spin-off. It is a fantastic title that dominates what is going on. I'm not reading that sentence again, Jesse.
Apex. It was Apex. It was a great game set within the universe.
It is still a great game set within the universe.
I'm sorry I called it a spin-off. I am sorry.
Because technically it was Titanfall 3. Starting with just two men who, for better or worse, left on bad terms, built stuff up with the cockroaches around them, formed a team, and were able to create what Respawn is today. Respawn was able to honestly create something that fans still hold close. And to this day, prepare for Titanfall.
Yes, that was it. That was Titanfall.
Titanfall, like I said, such a great precursor to Titanfall 2, which is kind of the staple in the series that fans still talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, not a Titanfall 2 episode, but the servers are still up for 2. There's still a player base that plays.
Absolutely.
And it still holds the test of time.
Yes, absolutely. And this is where we're going to dive into now is kind of why we chose this game and how we feel about this game. Alex, as always, start us off.
Again, I said at the beginning, I'm going to say it again. Movement, movement, movement.
Mm-hmm.
It is creamy, buttery, tasty, slippery movement that made the game so much more than a lot of other stuff I've played.
Yes.
Even, I'll jump into a modern either new shooter or another Call of Duty, and they've got stuff right. They've got some of the movement right. It feels right for that game, but it doesn't come close to even scratching that new fresh coat of paint you have on your Titan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just surprised that no one else has figured this out.
Yeah, again, it was night and day what they did with this, and they kind of had their back against the wall. They had to do something to prove, and this is what it was. And I remember when I first played this, I had saw some of the navigation, but It is. It's really what they said, a minute to learn and a lifetime to master. Because they give you kind of a tutorial level really quick before you play, and it's just so good. It's so natural. And even so, this is the only game I've ever felt where when I play it, it's almost like a real battlefield simulation. It's so crazy. It's so chaotic with all those AIs. You feel the pressure every time you turn a corner. And it surprised me when I was looking into this, and even when we had talked about it with some people when we were playing Titanfall 2, like not a lot of people played the first one.
No, it was, even though it had that marketing, it was a weird time to do it. Because I believe around that time you had major titles coming out that just swamped it. And it came out March, April, and I believe it came out right when you had AAA heavy hitters. So it got swamped in that week.
Yeah, well, you got to think, like, Call of Duty's releasing like every 2 minutes or something. I don't know. They release games all the time. Halo 4 had just released.
Yes.
A couple months before
actually, going back, Halo 4 was kind of like the quote-unquote Titanfall killer in terms of sales around that same time because you had Halo, you had Call of Duty, you had one other major title that released.
Battlefield, I think.
It might have been Battlefield. I think they released Battlefield and Titanfall same day.
It's so crazy.
It just came down to timing for a lot of things. And again, they may not have understood it or cared about it, but people do still play. Like Jesse said, I'm not one of them, but some people still do play a lot of these games for the campaign, even just to have that sticker mark of like, I've played the campaign, now I'll play multiplayer.
Yeah, and this is one of the only times that I think it ever would have like still sucked me in, because like when I bought it, I didn't know that, like, I saw a few trailers and that was it, because I was definitely like, I'll keep myself limited to knowledge to be very fresh on like the game when it comes to me. And I was like, there's no single player campaign, and I was kind of turned off. I was like, I'll play this, I'll see what's up about it, and it's actually super fun. Like the game is so fun, and you can even see its influence, because like Call of Duty, there's no dancing around it, kind of ripped it off like shortly afterwards. They saw it and they're like, okay, we're just going to do all those mechanics.
I mean,
too.
A lot of the future shooters did. They took, some of the elements, and even Halo's using grappling hook and Infinite coming up, and it looks to be the same style that they have within Titanfall 2 and Apex. That same kind of like whip around, like use it to kind of get up to places. So the influences as they continue on, go and go and go and go. And I think Titanfall was this first stepping stone to, again, getting to Titanfall 2.
Yes.
Seeing everything they did right, implementing that into the second game, but giving you a campaign that you actually care about, that actually like pulls on the heartstrings at times, that makes you feel that hectic warness. And you're right. When a Titan's stomping next to you and you're like running to this building, it does shake your screen a bit.
Oh, yeah. You feel the vibrations. Like when one walks near you, just you can feel it as well. And like, I love, like, you get a connection with your Titan. Say if you put it on autopilot and you jump out of it and it starts pointing the gun everywhere. Even in the first game, you get like kind of this connection with it, because you're like, you feel like there's sentience coming from this.
And that's what 2 brings to it with the campaign, is you actually getting to get that connection with a Titan that talks to you and is like, hey, pilot, what's going on? You get that feel when bad stuff happens to your Titan, or things start to do it, because this Titan is looking out for you.
Yeah, and that's what they're programmed to do, but you feel in that personal connection. It's so good, and again, just with the gameplay, with them kind of going against the norm and being like, no campaign. They also really didn't have the resources to do campaign and multiplayer. It kind of would have been a half-assed effort.
I agree. If it would have just been like, here's a map you go on, here's an okay multiplayer. So I'm glad they dedicated it to that. And the gunplay, the quality that they have between the different guns, the different Titan weaponry, the abilities. It allows you to play the game how you want. Do you want to be do you want to be like a climber and a high flyer sniper? Do you want to be someone who just gets in down and dirty? Do you want to just be a Titan killer? Like you just want to kind of focus on that.
Yeah, and I love that a single person with a Titan weapon can take out a Titan at full health. You just need to know how to navigate the map, and like that's why it's so balanced.
Yes, and it does well, because you take about probably like a tenth their health or something with a blast, something like that. So it's not something that like it's like half health dead. You have to shoot it a couple times, and the Titan can one-shot you. So you got to, like I said, navigate it, poke a window, jump on a roof.
It's not a bullet sponge, but it's not like a 2-shot kill either. So I think really this game did so much for multiplayer, and a lot of people don't really know it.
I totally agree with that.
And this game is terrific. If you've played Titanfall 1 and you haven't played the second, I'd say check it out. It's such a good time. And I said it was just such a breath of fresh air when I first played it. And it was so amazing. Unfortunately, I didn't get it on my birthday like I had hoped.
Sad times.
I was super excited, I'll be honest, but I think I was like, this was my 20th birthday or something. But so overall, I think its influence on gaming, it's so heavy. It's not even funny. And I think that we're still going to see the influence of it from years to come.
Yeah.
We see it in Titanfall 2 and then Apex and how much Apex is influencing as well. Like, it's awesome.
No, I love it. All right, so if you had to give a score that generally no one cares about because they want to hear mine, what would you give it?
I'd say 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10?
8 out of 10. There is everything about the multiplayer is perfect. I love it. There is that small part of me that did yearn for the single player campaign. But again, I'm not complaining too terribly much about it.
Anyway, let's go to mine. If I had to give it a rating, I would give it 3 grenades. Add in that I'm pretty much a god at Apex, and so Titanfall, I think, really trained me for that. I mean, when I'm running my 301-99 combo, it's really what matters. But in a serious note, add in that cool detection knife that you can see through walls, which is just such a cool element. Divide in the amount of times I get squished by a Titan. Not many, but it is very frustrating when it happens. But exponentially increase it when I get that kill, and I see a little dude running around outside, and I'm like, boop-doop. Come on in, Titan. Come on out of the sky. And you hear, and it crushes that dude.
Oh, perfect.
Equals day made.
Is that the score? Day made? Okay. That was Alex's score. Let us know if you agree or disagree with us. But that was our coverage diving into Titanfall. Research was done by Evan Barr and Jesse Reiners. Cover art by Jesse Reiners and Jessica Wellickson. And music written and composed by Evan Barr.
And those other ones, again, more important than these people. More important. Evan is one of them, though. Is our patrons. So if you haven't seen, we have pretty much redone our Patreon. We've got some really, really awesome stuff that we've added. We're adding to it now, which I absolutely enjoy. We've got a brand new show called From the Bargain Bin that is Patreon exclusive, as well as posters, shirts, stickers, bonus other content like post shows, private Q&As, Discord, all that's available. And we want to thank those who are with us today. We have Charles Zitter, Taqtix, Sky the Bear, AngryCanadien, Grant Dillon, Mr. Chofe, Cowyn Fong-Feliciano, DGamer1298, Alex Harper, Dilfix, Nick Heimann, Tuna0317, Brandon Christian, Richard Scanland, McChief, Big PapaSemechki, GrantODST, Loki2014, Nathan Vandervort, ClimbingSpork, Mr. 1989 or Mr. 1898, if I read it correctly, Evan. That's when Evan was born. That's why he's our composer. And finally, William Krull or Krull. Thank you so much for the support. Like I said, check it out if you haven't at patreon.com/finishthefight. As well, you catch me and Jesse at times over at twitch.tv/sourman70, where I and sometimes Jesse will be jumping in to play some games. So we'll be playing through the Titanfall, if not Titanfall 2 campaign. So we can just like chat about Titanfall a bit, see what's going on, because I have to double check if the Titanfall servers are up. Either way, check us there. We also be doing games weekly. So we stream about 3 times a week. Check us out there.
Yeah, and if you want to go follow us on social, we would appreciate that greatly. The links will be in the description of this episode, as well as join our Discord. Link is also in the description. It is free for any and all. We are growing. Seeing a lot of new faces makes me very happy. Whether, we have some...
By the way, Jesse just patted his belly through that. He just did like a very happy belly pat when he's like, makes me very happy. Yeah, you went... Makes me very happy.
Oh my gosh. Good. You guys make me very happy. I'm that happy. I'm also very hungry right now. And be sure as well to listen to us on your favorite podcast platform and give us a starred rating and review. We would appreciate that. But with that being said, that was Titanfall. I know early on a lot of people are asking for this, so ask and you shall receive. With that, I'm your host, Jesse Reiners.
And I am your host, Alex Kendall.
And thank you for tuning in to Finish the Fight, a gaming podcast.